Hello, welcome to the second episode of LP Brussels' presidential election show. Welcome to you all. It's great to have back our very own American political expert, Ryan Hunter. Welcome back, Ryan.
Thank you.
And it's an absolute pleasure to welcome to this show the Honorable Michael Meehan. Welcome, Michael. Michael is the Chief Exec of Squared Communications, but also a founding partner at Potomac West Group, but also, I believe, a guest lecturer at Columbia University. But you're mainly on the show, Michael, because you have been at the epicenter of politics, communications, and policy now in the States and around Capitol for over 3 decades. And there are so many things you've been involved in. There's too many to mention, but most notably, I guess for me at least, is you were the U.S. Senate Chief of Staff, and you've been the communications chief for several U.S. senators over the years. But you'll probably talk a bit about your experience, particularly in campaigns, during the course of the next few minutes, Michael. So a warm welcome to you, and we're looking forward to what you have to say from the US perspective. So if I could start off with the RNC, we analysed the DNC last week, and I think Ryan in particular highlighted how emotional the debate has become, moving away from reason and evidence and policy to a more emotionally focused campaign. So what do we make of the RNC this week?
Well, picking up on your point about an emotional versus a lack of policy, there's such a lack of policy at the Republican convention, they didn't even pass a platform. Now, typically they're not big deals, but they're organizing principles for the parties. And Trump was so not running on policy that they don't even have a policy. He never once said in his hour and 20 minutes last night what he would do going forward. He just spent time seeking chaos, wreaking chaos, attacking Joe Biden personally by name 42 times. So he's clearly got a law and order approach that, all this chaos is happening. And if Joe, although ironically under his watch, but if we elect Joe Biden, then the chaos will be all over the streets. And so where the Democrats presented a more unified, these are the things we want to build America back better. I think both parties did what they've been setting out to do. They did it well. I mean, this is the first time we've had not in-person conventions in forever, and so to pull off this on TV, was what both parties wanted to achieve. I think that Biden's pick of Harris and roll out for 10 days. She came out very strongly against Trump yesterday in a pre-buttal, so she's showing that she's got the ability to be an attack person, but do it in a measured way. So I think that, but the Trump folks, there were 7 people named Trump that were in primetime speaking roles, and not any one of the other Republican leaders. Mitch McConnell at the very end, the leader of the Republicans in the Senate, did send in a tape at the very last minute, but so it was a very Trump-centric week.
Yeah. So I'll come back to you, Michael, on how you think that went down with the folks at home, which I guess is what matters most. But first of all, just bringing Ryan here again. You've had the chance for the last fortnight to compare both. Some commentators this side of the pond actually were saying Republicans put on a more professional show, maybe learning from that first week of, as Michael said, the first time we've ever had virtual conventions. What was your take, Ryan, both on the content and indeed the communication technology that was used?
Well, to be honest, I think that it has to go down as a success, based purely on the fact that when it came down to Sunday evening, we still had no idea what was going to be put in front of the American voters. Even the news media had no idea. So from a very low expectation level, I think that I was pleasantly surprised with what they put on show, purely from a communication standpoint. Now, on the content side, it was a bit all over the place, but based on some of the fears that Republicans were expressing over the weekend ahead of the convention, I think that it has to go down as a success. Now, on the messaging, I think 2 things were happening at the same time. One of them was, with the base rhetoric, trying to excite the base, but also trying to target your non-voters who would lean towards Trump, with, as Michael said, the law and order rhetoric. But the second thing as well was targeting these Republican-leaning independent voters and trying to create a permission structure that would let them vote Republican without feeling bad about it. And there was a lot of time dedicated towards telling voters that Donald Trump is not as bad as you think and is much better than Joe Biden as a person. And I think we saw that with some of his family members who were spending quite a lot of time on his character. And I think this is the main message coming out.
So back to you, Michael, because I guess one of our fears or concerns here in Europe is that we misread American politics and American polling. So we look at them both and we think, well, the Democrats surely, you know, at least in terms of policy, as you may have far more content, which is reassuring for us Europeans. But secondly, they're well ahead in the polls. You know, it's a sizable margin. Almost what can go wrong?
Well, the last 5 presidential campaigns, the Democrats received more votes nationally and lost the White House, because here in America, we pick our presidents by the Electoral College, which each state gets awarded a full number based on population. That's how Trump won. He got 46% of the vote, but he got 303 electoral votes. The thing about the Trump presidency is that his poll has essentially been unchanged. His favorabilities are in the low 40s. In the worst of moments for him, he might dip into the 30s, but he's never gotten over 46. And his negative numbers have been solidly at 55 for almost 4 years of his presidency. So it's been a very stable view of Trump. The question for Biden is that, unlike Hillary Clinton, who also had negative numbers above 55 all during the campaign, she was leading by 2.5 points in the final national poll. She won by 2.5 points in the final national poll, but inside the states, she lost by 70,000 votes out of 135 million cast. So, you know, it was a very narrow and very fortunate for Trump to pull this off. He's run the exact same playbook, except he's had 4 years of being president now. And so what that means is there are 8 states that he won. If he does not win 6 of those 8 states, he can't win the election again. And as we speak today, he is not ahead in any one of those states in any poll right now if the election were held today. But the election's not held today in August. The election's held on November the 3rd. And so there's still a lot of time left. There's 3 big presidential debates, 1 vice presidential debate in late September, early October. So, you know, that's sort of the next big moment of the campaign, are these sort of, you know, the whole country stops and watches kind of moments.
Yeah. And Ryan, coming back to you, particularly it's the same playbook as last time. Can it work this time, bearing in mind he's been in office for 4 years now? I mean, the novelty surely worn off.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And they certainly think that it hasn't worn off. And you saw some of the speakers, such as the widow of the St. Louis cop, who spoke about her husband who was killed during the riots. You know, that was a very powerful moment last night that rivaled many of the powerful moments in the DNC. And then you also had Donald Trump Jr. this week talking about the fear that could come from a Joe Biden America. You know, a quote that he said was that you do not want to call 911 and have it go to voicemail. You also had Ivanka that was deployed to talk about her father's achievements. And, you know, they really went very heavy on the emotional side. So while we may think that it could wear off, they certainly don't think so. And their response to the Democrats going very strong on the emotion side was just to follow suit and double down. And let's see in November if that bears fruit.
Yeah. And Michael, did you agree that there are risks here, though, in the weeks ahead, that by using that, yes, the old playbook, but nonetheless it may resonate, particularly voters, maybe you want to refer to this, the concerns people have in America about safety and law and order? Well,
in the last 120 years in America, there have been a recession, a presidential election, enormous racial strife, and a pandemic. Only in those 4 years, only 3 of them ever popped up. This year, 2020, there are 4. Trump has failed miserably on the pandemic side. That is a fear that every person who has a kid going to school is living with across the board in America. You add the social unrest, the shooting of innocent men by the police, and Trump is definitely playing this card. He has not found a decent way to attack Joe Biden. Joe Biden has never been trailing Donald Trump in a poll since he announced he was running for president. Trump is looking for a way, and he's trying to, fan the fire of in certain cities where almost all peaceful protests have been taking place, to put this fear in. But the thing is, in 2018, the suburban women revolted on Trump and elected and flipped the Democratic House by 40 seats. And it was primarily because the suburban women were sick and tired of Donald Trump 2 years ago, and nothing has changed to make that any better. So he's hoping some old strategy of scaring suburban women with physical harm will overweigh the 4 years of what he's done.
Yeah. Can I turn to the campaign itself? Obviously, again, a bit like the conventions, it's a campaign like none other. We are going to have some presidential debates and vice presidential debate. I think it'll be one debate, but there won't be much of an on-the-ground campaign. There won't be local rallies. There won't be town hall meetings. It's going to be a very virtual event, the whole campaign from beginning to end. Are we seeing any new trends or tactics being deployed by either of the two parties, or indeed by the media, or indeed by third parties in this election campaign? I mean, I think again, maybe the same playbook, but is the technology different? Are the tactics any different? Are the strategies any different? Or is it people really just sort of hunkering down and doing their best? And perhaps Michael first.
Well, one of the more noticeable things is because of COVID, there's been big pressure to increase mail-in ballots here. Previously, 45 million to 50 million people have voted with a mail-in ballot. This year, they're expecting it could go up to 70 million. So there's been a big debate, and campaigns are focused on how to get people ballots, how to follow the ballots. Like in some states, voting can begin as early as September 18th for the November election. So the tactics will be getting those states, getting your voters, calling them, texting them, seeing if they've turned in their ballots. We have some states that are all mail: Washington, Oregon, and they have been for years. But there are other states where it's split, where you can go to a polling place to vote, as well as an absentee vote. So each state has their own rules of how you can vote. So that's definitely one of the bigger tactics that the campaigns are dealing with, is just the almost doubling of the mail-in voting process.
Yeah. And Ryan, any views on whether or not you've detected any new trends or tactics being deployed by either party, or indeed, as I said, the media or third parties?
Well, first of all, you've seen some Zoom fundraisers happening certainly from the Democrat side and also on the Republican side. But for me, it's a trend I've seen is that voters have been much more engaged in recent months with so much happening. And so much focus on a very select number of events and stories that we have, less undecided voters than ever before, in my opinion. You can throw out all these nice-looking campaign ads in place of rallies, but I think that Donald Trump is hitting a wall right now, and because most voters have already decided where they stand. And so even if there is a situation where he may hold some rallies in the very few days before the election, I can't see how he can fight back against this trend.
If I can turn to very briefly the policy profile of both the parties, or at least the Democrats vis-a-vis the Republicans, that, as we said, are pretty light on policy. I mean, one of the concerns we have in Europe is our once very stable and strong global ally, America, is now bitterly divided. It's been bitterly divided now for a decade or more. You could go back even further, but it looks like whatever the outcome of the election, American society, American policy, American politics will remain polarized and divided, and that means our friend is divided, and we all know what happens to houses that are divided. So is this election going to heal anything in America, or are these arguments just going to be played out again, and we're going to have a deadlock in the midterms as we have had done over the recent years? Will this, as we see it, this political paralysis, political polarization continue irrespective of the election outcome, or is something this time going to change? Michael?
Well, tell me what it looks like in 67 days. I mean, I can see a scenario where Donald Trump narrowly wins. I can see a scenario that Joe Biden narrowly wins. But I also could see a scenario that Joe Biden wins by a lot. And if he's able to flip the U.S. Senate and expand the margins or keep the margin, the majority in the House, and then you have 4 years of a Democratic presidency, there'll be a chance to do some things. Donald Trump campaigned 4 years ago to totally change the American healthcare system, wipe out Obamacare, and in 4 years, when they had complete control of the government, they did none of that. So the Democrats will come trying to address the healthcare because COVID is unfairly attacking the poor and those with less access to healthcare. And so part of the structure and when kids aren't going back to school classrooms, it's going to be a daily reminder for every voter that this was not handled well, that many other countries around the world handled this much better than Trump did. And Democrats will come in with a majority to go ahead and do something to address this. So I think there's some opportunity there, depending upon the margin. But if it comes down to another 48 to 46%, nobody got a majority, nobody got over 50, I fear that we'll have 4 more years of turmoil.
Yeah, and do you share that analysis, Ryan, that if the Democrats do win by a margin, there is a chance to perhaps address some of those underlying concerns in America, such as healthcare, as Michael mentioned?
Yes, well, I think the Democrats certainly hope that they can have a big rejection of Trump. Certainly, they're trying to build a big coalition, which includes their progressive wing, as well as some former Republicans, as well as current Republicans. But for me, the concern is that you have two sides fighting for an idea of America and fighting against an idea that they hate. There's less policy in this debate. So when it comes down to actually governing, it's tough to see what the road ahead is like. I mean, if Joe Biden wins by a tight or even a big margin, he's going to have to satisfy quite a few people who voted for him and maybe didn't vote for him based on ideas, but just on the fact that he's not Trump. So, you hear this coming out from his own party, from the progressive wing, that once in office, they may not agree with the ideas that Joe Biden's been talking about in the campaign, but they support him now. But once in office, they're going to fight like hell for their own ideas. So it's really hard to say how things are going to shape out. But I would agree that things like healthcare could be addressed with a big Biden victory.
Okay. Well, final question to you both, if I may, and it's a question I'm going to put on every show, I'm afraid, because you're not going to get away coming on the show without answering the question: who's going to win? I know you can't necessarily put all your money on that answer, but just your hunch, your feeling, based on your experience. Start off with Ryan, end with Michael, if we may. Ryan, who is going to win? And from where we're looking now in terms of the polls, what can go wrong for Joe Biden in the coming week?
That's a lot can go wrong. That's the bottom line here. And I'll start off with something surprising that I learned this week. There was a new poll from Pew that lays out the top issues for voters. And a big change from 2016 is that violent crime is now a top 5 issue for voters, and it was not even a top 10 issue 4 years ago. Events are really playing into Donald Trump's law and order arguments, and that is a big thing that can go wrong. Can Trump win? Absolutely. We should not discount any outcome here, because as we saw in 2016, even the biggest lead in the polls can be destroyed in a matter of days, if not months. So personally, it's tough to see how Donald Trump can change the trends we've seen in the polls. And I think the undecided voters are a much smaller group than before. So I don't see things falling back into the margin of error, but we absolutely should be on our toes for something to change and for Trump to pull out a narrow victory.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. I'm sure we'll come back to that in the weeks ahead. And again, I'm not going to let you get away with it, Michael, without asking you, based on your experience of previous campaigns, who is going to win, and what can go wrong at this stage for Joe Biden?
Well, it's really difficult to knock off an incumbent president. I worked for John Kerry in 2004, and George Bush was a wartime president. Donald Trump is a president of a war that he probably creates himself and fans the fires on. So there is a lot of that. We've got 270-something nominees. We've got Supreme Court members who are in their 70s and 80s. So, personal health is a variable that you could have happen between now and election day that could shake up the landscape. But it all come down to turnout. I'd rather be Biden than Trump right now with leads and significant leads in several states that he only needs to win 2 to win the presidency. So, I think a bad debate performance could shake up the race, in late September, early October by either one. Although Trump seems to be pretty consistent about how he performs in front of reality TV shows that he runs every day. But I think Biden wins.
Okay, well, thank you, Michael. Again, I'm sure we'll be returning to that in the weeks to come. Just like to thank you both for sharing your insight, particularly on the RNC this week. Hopefully, we'll see you both back on the show in the weeks to come. And to all our viewers, thank you for tuning in again to LP FRSA's presidential election show. Thank you very much. Tune in next week. Goodbye.